Hi everyone, ya sabes que Carlos Tirfata to another episode of Dimitra's Dishes. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to make gigantes blaki. This is a vegan recipe, even though I do add some feta cheese at the end, which you can leave out if you're fasting for Lent or something like that. They're so good. They're buttery, large lima beans that are really common in Greece. If you can't find them, you can use regular lima beans for this or any white beans that you have on hand. But these beans in particular are really good because they're just rich and nutritious and just melt in your mouth, buttery, smooth whenever you make them. They're so good. They're going to be cooked in a light tomato sauce. Everything comes together in just a few easy steps and then the oven does all of the work. I think you guys are gonna love these. Let's get started. Okay, so we're gonna begin with the gigantes. So these are actual gigantes beans that I bought online. You can find them in a specialty Greek market. If you don't have one nearby, then you can get them online, or you can go with the giant lima beans that are usually sold in the dry food section of your supermarket where they have the beans and rice and things like that. It's important to soak them overnight, so put them in a large bowl, cover them with some water, make sure that they're completely covered with some extra water on top because they do absorb lots of water, and just set them on the counter overnight. They're gonna plump up and get nice and big, and then the next day or 10 hours later, whenever you're making them, 10 to 12 hours later, you can drain that water out and transfer them to a big pot with lots of water. I like to salt my beans. Some people don't salt them. They say that it makes them tough. I really don't have that problem. I've been salting them for a long time. Bring the pot to a boil and then reduce the heat to like a medium and let them boil for 35 to 40 minutes or until they're fork tender. Don't overboil them. You don't want them to start mushing up on you. In the meantime, while the beans are cooking, we're going to prepare the sauce, and the sauce is a very simple red sauce. I have one large onion that I've peeled. I'm just going to finely chop that and add it to a saucepan with at least 1/4 cup of olive oil. These vegetarian recipes tend to have lots of olive oil, but you put as much as you like in there. I'm also going to add a little pinch of salt and put this on the stovetop over medium heat, and it's going to cook until the onions are nice and soft and golden. That can take up to 10 minutes. Next, I'll add 4 grated garlic cloves. I like to grate my garlic way ahead of time and keep it frozen. I just break a piece off and just throw it in the pot. It's just going to warm through until it's nice and fragrant. Since it's so finely grated, you don't want to overcook it, otherwise it can get a little bit bitter. Once that's done, I'm just going to add 2 cans. These are 15-ounce cans. You could do 1 large 28-ounce can of tomatoes. I've pureed them so that way the sauce is nice and smooth. I'll also rinse the cans out with a little bit of water. And when I'm adding the tomato sauce, I make sure that the heat is off. Otherwise, it can start bubbling and it'll burn you. Next, I'll add 2 teaspoons of granulated sugar. This really helps balance that acidity that the tomatoes tend to have. You can do honey instead, or if you don't want that sweetness, leave it out altogether. We're going to season it with a little bit of salt, freshly cracked black pepper. I like to throw in some crushed red pepper flakes for a little bit of heat. A teaspoon of oregano. I don't add too much oregano because when oregano cooks, it tends to get a little bit bitter. So you could either leave the oregano out of the sauce or put a little bit in right now and then a little bit when the beans are mixed in all together. So we're just going to bring this sauce to a boil. Once it boils, mix everything up and take it off of the heat, and then we're going to put everything all together as soon as the beans are done cooking. Once the beans are done cooking, go ahead and drain them into a colander, and as you can see, they're nice and tender, but they're not mushing. Next, we're going to transfer the beans to a 9 by 13-inch baking pan that I have right here. I'll add the sauce on top. I'm going to make sure I get all of that sauce out. Now I'm going to season a little bit more, give everything a taste, and if it needs some more salt and pepper, you could add it at this point. I'll also add another teaspoon of dried oregano. Mix everything up and it's ready for the oven. The oven should be preheated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. These are going to bake on the center rack uncovered for about 40 or 45 minutes, and you can take them out and put some feta cheese in there. I like to crumble it here and there and kind of tuck it into the sauce and in between the beans. And then I just return it to the oven and let it cook for another about 10 or 15 minutes. I love the caramelization that the beans and the sauce get around the edges. And if your oven, it cooks at a little bit of a lower temperature and you want more color on top, you can turn the broiler on for the last 5 minutes or so. Just keep a close eye on it. Once it comes out of the oven, the sauce should have thickened. It's going to look beautiful and just a rich red on top with some caramelization, like I said. Let it sit for a little bit before you serve it. If the sauce does get a little bit too thick and you want a little bit more sauce in there, you can add some hot water to it. That's a little trick that I do. Some people like to add some ice cubes in there. It helps it cool down a little bit and also creates a little bit of a natural sauce. Either way is fine, but if you're serving it the next day, of course the sauce will have probably dried up, so you can definitely warm it on the stovetop with a little bit more hot water and then cook it down until it absorbs the water and there's a nice thick sauce at the end. Time for the taste test. I'm not a huge bean fan, but this is one of my favorite dishes, like of all time. It's up there in the top 10 foods just because of the sweetness that the sauce has. These large beans are just buttery and so smooth and so good. You can serve this as is with some feta cheese if you don't care about the meat. You can add some sausages to it or a side of meatballs. My mom always made meatballs to serve with this. This recipe is so delicious. Serve it with some olives, feta, and a nice green salad and some toasted bread to soak up that sauce. Head on over to the website to print the recipe out, and I'll be back here soon with another delicious recipe. Yes, sis.